episode 265, The Hard Lessons Autism Parenting Eventually Teaches Every Mom. Well, hey, friend. Welcome to another episode of the Not Your Average Autism Mom podcast. I am your host, Shannon Urquiola, and I'm so glad you're here, whether you are watching me on video or listening in like always. And in case we haven't met yet, I am the proud mom of two amazing young adults. My son Jordan, who is 29 now, was diagnosed with autism when he was 5 years old. So I've been walking this journey a long time, not just as his mom, but as his guardian and caregiver. I created this podcast because I know how hard and lonely this road can feel. And I also know how full your days are. And I want you to know that I never take the time that you spend with me for granted. That's why I try to keep all of these episodes around 20 minutes or less, just quick and real and practical, because that's always my goal. Before we jump into today's episode, I want to thank our sponsor this month, NeuroFree. April is Autism Awareness Month, and I've always believed that awareness should also include learning about options, research, and conversations that might bring hope to families like ours walking this autism parenting journey. So, a little bit later in this episode, I'll share a little bit more about who they are and the work they're doing for families raising children on the spectrum. And since this is our first episode in April, I do want to acknowledge April is Autism Awareness Month. Now, I also know that that phrase brings up a lot of different feelings depending on who you ask. Some people love the attention that it brings to autism. Others feel like awareness isn't really the point anymore, that what we really want is understanding and acceptance, not just a month where people, post puzzle pieces and light it up blue and move on with their lives. And if you're raising a child with autism, April just can feel a little strange sometimes, because for us, autism isn't something that shows up once a year, right? Autism is Tuesday morning. Autism is school meetings. Autism is sensory overload in the grocery store. Autism is bedtime routines that take an hour longer than you expected. Autism is part of every single day. And that's why I wanted to start April with a conversation that just feels really real, not statistics, not awareness campaigns, but the hard lessons that autism parenting eventually teaches every mom. The things that you learn over time, the things nobody tells you when your child is first diagnosed. And honestly, the things I wish that someone had told me 20 years ago, because something interesting happens to a lot of women raising autistic children. Somewhere in your 30s, 40s, or maybe even your 50s, you start to look at your life differently. You start asking questions like, am I okay? Why am I always exhausted? Why do I feel like I'm carrying everything all the time? Why do I feel like I disappeared somewhere along the way? And for a lot of moms raising children on the spectrum, those questions come later than they do for other people, because for years, you've been doing what had to be done, managing behaviors, advocating in schools, researching therapies, driving to appointments, trying to understand a child or children who experience the world differently. You've been living in constant problem-solving mode. And when you live that way long enough, something starts to happen. You forget to check in with yourself. I know I did. There were years where autism needed my attention. It felt like every single minute of every single day, at home, in school, in the community, medically, emotionally. And one thing that I can say honestly is that autism does not ever take a break. It doesn't pause when you're sick. It doesn't pause when you're overwhelmed. It doesn't pause during the holidays or vacations or big life events. Autism is autism on the hard days, and autism is autism on the good days too. And living inside that reality teaches you some lessons. Some of them are great, Some of them are a little painful, and some of them take years to fully understand. So today, I'm just going to share a few of what I think are the hard lessons autism parenting eventually teaches every mom. Not because I have everything all figured out, but because I think that hearing someone say these things out loud might make you feel a little less alone. So, hard lesson number one: autism doesn't pause so that you can catch your breath. One of the biggest traps that many moms fall into is believing that you'll take care of yourself when things calm down. You tell yourself things like, when school settles down, when their behaviors improve, when we get through this therapy, when life feels less chaotic. But the truth many of us eventually learn is this: autism rarely settles down in neat, predictable seasons. There is always something, another transition, another change, another challenge to navigate. And if you wait for life to get quiet before you take care of yourself, you will be waiting a very long time. One of the most important things I eventually learned is that you cannot wait for calm. You have to create small pockets of peace inside the chaos. And that might look like something as simple as a quiet walk, 5 minutes alone in the car, a conversation with someone who actually understands. It doesn't have to be big, but it does have to exist. Hard lesson number two: not everything is an emergency. When you first start raising a child with autism, everything feels urgent. Every therapy feels critical. Every behavior feels like it must be fixed immediately. Every decision feels like it will shape your child's entire future. But over time, experience teaches you something incredibly important. Not everything is an emergency. Some things take time. Some things unfold slowly. Some things look very different 5 years later than they did today. When Jordan was younger, I spent a lot of time worrying about the future, trying to figure out what his life would look like, trying to solve problems that didn't even exist yet. And what I've learned through the years is that life unfolds one step at a time. Most of the things we spend hours worrying about today never actually happen the way we imagine. And this is actually a good moment to pause and share a little bit more about our sponsor this month. If you've been part of this community for any length of time, you know I am very careful about what I bring to you here. Parents in our world hear a lot of things, and I only share something when I believe it's worth learning more about. Recently, some of you might know I was joined by Jory Scott from NeuroFree for a 3-part educational series about cell infusion, stem cells, and autism. NeuroFree is a US-based provider of patented cell infusion therapy designed for children and young adults with autism. Their process begins with a consultation, a medical review guided by a board-certified physician. Their approach focuses on supporting neurological wellness and reducing inflammation in nerve pathways. Every child's journey is different and their outcomes vary. Some families report meaningful changes over time, while others might have smaller shifts. If you'd like to learn more or explore whether your child might be a candidate, you can visit neuro-free.com, or you can just call 504-294-8333 and schedule a consultation to get more information. All right, let's jump back into today's episode. Hard lesson number 3: your child's life doesn't have to look like yours to be good. This one took me a long time to understand. When we imagine our children's future, we often imagine something that looks similar to our own life: friends, activities, milestones, relationships, independence. But one of the most powerful shifts that can happen in autism parenting is realizing this: your child does not have to live the life you did to have a meaningful and happy life. Jordan has never had friends the way I did growing up. And for a long time, that really broke my heart because I assumed friendship had to look the way it looked in my life. But over time, I realized Jordan is happy living life his way. And happiness doesn't look the same for everyone. Hard lesson number 4: you cannot abandon yourself while raising your children. Many moms raising children on the spectrum slowly disappear, not intentionally, but gradually. Your focus shifts completely to your child, their needs, their therapies, their challenges. And years go by before you realize that you haven't asked yourself what you need in a very long time. I see this with the moms I coach all the time. They've spent years being strong, years holding everything together, years putting themselves last. And somewhere along the way, they forget they matter too. But you cannot abandon yourself in order to raise your children because this journey is long and you deserve to be part of your own life. Hard lesson number 5: you cannot live your life based on what other people think. This is a big one. And honestly, again, this is something that took me years to really understand. When you're raising an autistic child, there is a lot of pressure, sometimes spoken, sometimes unspoken, about what people think you should be doing, what you should be trying, where your child should be going, what experiences they should or should not be part of, how your family should look from the outside. And one area where I see this come up a lot when I'm coaching moms is around travel and family experiences. There's this huge wave of mom guilt that shows up when parents consider doing something without their autistic child, taking a vacation, traveling somewhere that would be overwhelming for them, even something like a work trip or, a destination vacation. I'll tell you, I was coaching one of the moms I work with several years ago. Her name is Blair, and she was wrestling with this exact situation. Her husband was planning a business trip, and she was able to travel with him. But they have a son, Kai, who I think he was around 13 at the time, and he really wasn't someone who enjoyed traveling. The airport experience alone would have been stressful. The change in routine would have been stressful. The destination itself wouldn't have been something that he would have enjoyed. But Blair was absolutely mortified at the thought of leaving him behind. She kept saying things like, "What will people think? Won't it look terrible if we go without him? What kind of parent does that?" And I remember saying to her something just very simple: the people who might judge you for that decision are not living your life. They aren't navigating Kai's sensory needs. They aren't managing routines and the supports that he depends on. They aren't the ones who know what he will actually enjoy or what will overwhelm him. And sometimes the most loving thing you can do is not force your child into experiences that aren't meant for them. And there's another layer to this that a lot of parents struggle with, but don't talk about very openly. Many families have other children. Those kids deserve to experience life too. They deserve the trips, the adventures, the moments that become memories later. Sometimes autism means certain experiences just aren't a good fit for that child. And allowing the rest of the family to still live those moments isn't selfish. It's balance. It's recognizing that every child in the family has different needs, and sometimes different things make them happy. I learned this in my own family too. Maddie grew up alongside Jordan, and autism was part of our family life every single day. There were plenty of moments where things revolved around his needs, his routines, his comfort, right? The environments that worked for him, and we didn't do the ones that didn't. But there were also times when it was important for Maddie to experience things that Jordan simply wouldn't have enjoyed, experiences that would have been overwhelming for him. And learning how to balance those things without feeling guilty was something I had to grow into over time. Because loving one child well should never mean another child has to miss out on life. And that's exactly what Blair eventually realized after that first trip. That first trip she took without Kai was incredibly hard for her emotionally. But something interesting happened afterward. She realized that Kai was perfectly happy staying home. He wasn't being left behind in a negative way. He was staying exactly where he was happiest. He stayed home in an environment that was comfortable and predictable for him. And over the years that followed, Blair and her family have taken other trips, even one to London where their daughter lives. And Kai stayed home again, exactly where he wanted to be, safe, comfortable, happy. And Blair realized that leaving him behind wasn't abandoning him, it was respecting who he is. Autism parenting teaches us that fair doesn't always mean identical. And protecting your family's ability to experience joy, even when your autistic child or children aren't part of every single activity, is not something that you should feel ashamed about. If you have safe options for care, if your child truly would not enjoy the travel or the destination, if the experience would be overwhelming or miserable, you are allowed to make the decision that works best for your entire family. Not based on what people might think, but based on what you know about your child and your life. Because the truth is, the people judging your decisions are not walking this road. You are. Hard lesson number 7. You cannot control everything. And this one is tough because many of us become incredibly good at solving problems. You learn, you research, you advocate, you push for answers, but there are still things you cannot control. You cannot control every behavior. You cannot control how other people respond to your child. You cannot control how every day unfolds. And learning to release some of that control doesn't mean giving up. It means understanding the difference between what you can influence and what you can't. And hard lesson number 8, peace is not something autism gives you. It's something you have to build. Many moms believe that peace will come when things get easier, when behaviors improve, when communication improves, when life becomes less complicated. But peace doesn't come from perfect circumstances. It comes from learning how to live inside the life you have. It comes from acceptance and choosing acceptance daily, sometimes several times a day. It comes from perspective. And it comes from realizing that even inside the hard parts of this parenting journey, there is still room for joy and happiness. One of the hardest lessons autism parenting eventually teaches you is this: you cannot live your life trying to satisfy everyone else's expectations. Not the schools, not your families, not strangers watching from the outside. You have to learn to trust what you know about your child, your family, and your life, even when other people don't understand it. The world will always have opinions about what you should or shouldn't be doing because they aren't living this parenting journey. You are. One of the greatest freedoms you will ever experience is the moment that you stop worrying about what other people think your life should look like and you start building the life that actually works for your family. If I could sit down with the version of me from 20 years ago, the mom who was scared and overwhelmed and trying to hold everything together, I wouldn't try to explain autism. I would tell her something much simpler. I would tell her, don't lose yourself while raising your child, because this journey is long. And the moms who learn how to protect their peace along the way are the ones who make it through this journey without losing themselves in the process. All right, my friends, I hope this has been helpful. I hope you take my words to heart. And if today's episode resonated with you, I hope you'll share it with another autism mom who might need to hear it too. And again, we want to thank NeuroFree. You can visit their website or call the number that I spoke of mid podcast to get more information on their patented cell infusion therapy. Have a great week ahead. We are all just learning together along the way. And until next week, remember, above all, you, mama, are doing amazing at this mom thing.